Hi guys, welcome to the Core Quest. I hope you all doing well. Today video is what if Izuku finds out he has a revival quirk and uses the opportunity to become a vigilante. So without wasting time, let's get start the video. Izuku wakes to a dull ache radiating in his cheek, courtesy of the bruise that Kaken had so generously bestowed upon him the day before. So it was going to be that kind of a morning. Groaning as he sits up, his ribs apparently also reminiscing about the beating they received, Izuku tiredly drags his eyes to his phone, alarm still going off, silently cursing it for having the audacity to force him into the new day. Sometimes, when Izuku allows himself to comprehend the sick reality of his life, he finds that it no longer resembles the roots from which he sprouts. He is a fickle rose bush that was cared for and raised and coddled in its early seasons by a loving mother, growing strong, interwoven roots and a reliable base. And, Izuku thinks, he would have been a lovely rose bush. He would have flourished and unfurled, and oh, wouldn't that have been nice? Instead, along came Bakugou Katsuki, vegetation killer, in a compatibly sized spray bottle. He destroyed what was left of Izuku's youth and poisoned his chances at a future, and his childhood best friend doesn't even have the courtesy to abandon Izuku after. Kaken shoves his existence down Izuku's throat every goddamn day. But this is the life Izuku has. It is ugly and broken and unrecognizable, and so unbearably his and God's. How Izuku wishes it wasn't, but it is. So he makes his peace. He gets out of bed and puts on his school uniform. He brushes his hair and packs his schoolwork in his bag and eats breakfast by himself in the dimly lit storage room, and he pretends. He pretends and pretends that nothing has changed. He pretends that living in a makeshift home in an abandoned underground parking garage isn't that bad, that he is safe and normal and wanted, and Kaken is still his hero. Oh, how Izuku pretends. He pretends that he doesn't have nightmares about what Kaken has done, what he could do, what Izuku should have done. He pretends that he doesn't hate that the skin he has to wear every single day is the same skin that Kaken has marred with scars Izuku never wanted. He pretends that his smile is real and his laugh isn't forced, and the way Kaken's voice sounds when he says Deku doesn't make him want to vomit. Izuku has mastered the intricacies of pretending, of manipulating everything around him so that his brain cannot comprehend anything but the world he has so carefully created for it. And yes, some part of him knows it is pretend. And one day he will have to acknowledge that nothing is the same as it was, and it never will be again, and Kaken isn't the hero Izuku thought he was, and Izuku won't be the rosebush that his mother promised he would be. Yes, one day that will all have to be true, but not yet. For just a little longer, Izuku allows himself this gift of pretending. Sighing as he gets up from the table, Izuku grabs his school bag and makes his way out of the storage room that has become his home, locking the door behind him. As he walks up out of the parking garage and to school, Izuku lets his mind wander. Hero analysis, his work schedule, the classic Japanese lit paper that is due next Tuesday. Anything to keep his thoughts away from the fact that he is now 4 blocks away from school and therefore 4 blocks away from becoming Deku. It is a fun little role that Izuku gets to play for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. 1 minute he is Izuku, the homeless 14-year-old who is making the most out of the hand he was dealt, and the second he steps on school grounds, he is Deku, that disgusting waste of space and walking punching bag. Izuku wastes no time walking through the school gates and up to his classroom. There is a very strict schedule to follow on school mornings. He stops by the janitor's closet to grab cleaning wipes before heading onto the classroom. It's not a question of if there will be something on his desk, it's a question of what. Sometimes it is just some spider lilies, which Izuku honestly doesn't mind. They are easy to clean up, pretty, and leave a subtly sweet scent in the air. No such luck today. Izuku looks down at the words written on his desk in various handwritings, apparently a class-wide effort. Quirkless, fuck, useless, kill yourself, worthless, trash, and revolved. Deku. Izuku likes to pretend that after seeing and hearing the same words for the 100th time, they lose their sting. They don't. He scrubs his desk clean and throws away the bleach wipes. He's not exactly sure why he comes early to clean his desk or why he hides the evidence that it was ever dirty. The whole class has been responsible for at least some portion of the mess at least once. Who is he trying to fool? He knows it's himself. Izuku doesn't allow himself to dwell on it anymore, instead turning on his heel and heading to the gym locker rooms. He has managed to turn the parking garage into a surprisingly homey space, but he can't magically pipe in water for a shower. Izuku undresses and hangs his uniform near the shower so that the steam will ease some of the wrinkles. He turns on the hot water and walks to the mirrors above the sinks while he waits for the water to heat up. He looks over his body for any injuries that need bandages, ignoring the violent purple bruises that are blooming across his torso. Those hurt, but there's nothing Izuku can really do for them. He lifts his gaze to meet his own eyes in the mirror. Gods! He looks like his mother. There is a tug in his chest at that thought. Anger. Izuku decides. He hates her for leaving. It's homesickness. He misses her. He hasn't seen his mother since he was 12. Though, if Izuku was being honest, she might as well have left when he was 9. Izuku knows his mother tried. In the beginning, she still showered him with love and support after his diagnosis. Sure, she started keeping him inside more, treating him like he was made of glass, but she cared. Then came the medical bills. The healthcare in Japan is pretty comprehensive, but it only covers about 70% of costs for school-aged children, and when you are as poor as the Midrayas, that 30% is all it takes. Be careful, Zuku. Mommy doesn't want you to get hurt. Quickly turned into damn it. Again, I know you quirkless are fragile, but I can't keep doing this. More doctor's visits meant more bills, which meant more shifts. His mother didn't make much as a housekeeper, and the extra shifts she had to pick up took a toll on her body. Izuku couldn't really blame her for resenting him when it's his fault. She now has joint pain and she was always exhausted. She was gone a lot for work, but other times she was just gone. Izuku never really knew where she went or when she would be back. She started leaving for longer and longer spells when he was about 9 or 10. Izuku ended up having to get a job to cover the cost of groceries, which was difficult. No one wanted to hire a quirkless kid, but eventually he stumbled across a help-wanted flyer on a phone pole that looked just sketchy enough that they probably wouldn't care who applied. He called the number on the flyer and thought Izuku was now the proud holder of the position of trash relocation crew, which essentially means he goes to Takoba Beach every day and hauls loads of trash to a dumpster that is emptied into a landfill at the end of every week. Izuku was not exactly thrilled at the idea of being waist-deep in trash, but he was never one to complain, so he took the position and has been working there for the past 4 years. Looking back now, Izuku was incredibly grateful that this was the job he managed to get. It doesn't pay well and it's hard work, but it was how he was able to build his home in the parking garage. Izuku knew that it was only a matter of time before his mother stopped coming home, and he also knew that there was no way he would be able to make rent on his own. So, anytime Izuku found something like a table that wasn't too broken or a mattress that didn't smell or have concerning stains, he took it to the abandoned parking garage he had discovered on his way to work one day. He got the eviction notice the week after his 12th birthday and officially moved into the parking garage right after. It really isn't bad. He stays in what used to be a fairly large storage room. It's about the size of a dorm room and is big enough to fit his bed, a table, a clothing rack, bookshelf, pantry cabinet, and a love seat. But, again, no shower. Which leads to where Izuku was now, still staring at himself in the mirror in the locker rooms. Snapping out of his thoughts, Izuku shakes his head and goes through the motions of his efficient shower, having wasted too much time thinking to allow any time to enjoy the shower. Izuku slips out of the shower and back into his now less wrinkled uniform, grabbing his bag before heading back to the classroom. The hallways are crowded now, the warning bell sounding right as he steps through the classroom door. Izuku doesn't look up as he makes his way to his desk. He just quietly pulls out his notebook and pencil before setting his bag on the ground and settling in for the day. Izuku used to mutter and even talk to his classmates, trying to make friends. Now, he doesn't dare make any noise that isn't required. Kaken doesn't like it when he makes noise. Not that Izuku was left alone when he is quiet. No. He still gets his beatings no matter how invisible he tries to make himself. But Izuku doesn't want to give Kaken a reason to hit him harder than he does. The school day passes by, blissfully uneventful, Izuku eating his packed lunch at his desk and breezing through the afternoon classes. Maybe I'll go home without any problems today. He thinks to himself. Oi, Deku, idiot, you knew better. Izuku lifts his eyes from his hero analysis journal to the red irises that are locked on him. Yes, Kaken, the fuck are you always writing in those notebooks for? It's fucking weird. The blonde rips the book out of Izuku's hands, getting a dangerous smirk on his face, but Izuku stays silent. He knows better than to stand up to him. Kaken walks over to the open window before turning back to face Izuku. Your creepy fucking writing isn't useful. Quirks like mine are useful. See, watch, he says, his palms already starting to smoke. With a small pop, Izuku's notebook catches fire in Kaken's hands and is tossed out the window, falling into the fountain below. Izuku rushes to the window and stares down at the smoldering remains of his most prized possession. Kaken dusts his hands off with a chuckle as he walks away, but stops mid-step as if he just had an idea. Izuku never likes Kaken's ideas. You know, Kaken starts, turning back to face Izuku. If you want a quirk so bad, pray that you'll have one in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof. Izuku is frozen, eyes glued to the ground outside, waiting for the rest. He knows Kaken isn't done. Kaken tells him to kill himself all the time. That isn't his idea. Maybe, Kaken says, walking up behind Izuku and planting his hands on his shoulder blades. You just need a little push. Kaken punctuates his sentiment by setting off a concentrated explosion as he shoves Izuku forward. Izuku gasps and tears spring in his eyes as pain erupts across his back and shoulders, the smell of burning fabric and flesh filling his nostrils as he sinks to his knees. This is nowhere near the first time that Kaken has used his quirk on him, but, fuck, it's never burned this badly. Over the ringing in his ears, Izuku can hear the muffled laughter of Kaken and his friends as they leave the room. While creeps up his throat, both from the pain and the smell of his own seared flesh, and Izuku stumbles into the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet in time to empty the contents of his stomach. With shaky legs, Izuku walks to the sinks and rinses his mouth before bracing himself to look at the damage to his back. It's not an easy task, given the location of the wounds, but Izuku manages to catch a glimpse of the angry, red skin peeking through the singed holes of his uniform. Fuck, they are going to be nearly impossible to dress with bandages and will absolutely scar. Undressing from the waist up, Izuku twists his neck around to get a better look at the burns in the mirror. They are most concentrated on the inner half of his shoulder blades with pointed sections feathering up and out across his shoulders, almost resembling wings. Izuku looks back to the mangled uniform in his hands and decides to toss it. There's really no patching it at this point. Instead, he does his best to gingerly wrap bandages around the fresh burns, hissing in pain as the cotton gauze presses against them. Izuku thankfully always has first aid supplies in his school bag, a lesson he learned early on. He almost pulls out a fresh t-shirt to wear home, another item that has become a necessity. He stifles his cries of pain as he eases the shirt down over the bandages and lets his tears fall silently down his face. He settles on holding his bag instead of carrying it on his shoulder, the pain of the bandages and his shirt already enough to make him see starbursts of light at the edges of his vision. But this is all okay. Izuku can keep pretending for a little longer. No, he can't. He just needs to go home and sleep it off. When he wakes up, the burn will already be healing and it probably won't hurt as bad, and it's Friday, so he'll have the weekend to recover even more. And Kaken might even go easy on him when he gets back. Izuku nods to himself, trying to cement the flimsy lies he has to string together to make his life seem even remotely bearable. Yeah, Izuku thinks, I can do this. Just one more year of middle school, a broken bar. Izuku lets his thoughts drift to unrealistic fantasies of new schools and classmates who like him even after they find out he's under-evolved. His body is on autopilot as he leaves the school, fishing his analysis journal out of the fountain as he goes, and makes his way through the worsening neighborhoods that lead to his parking garage. It's one of Izuku's favorite things to do. He can just tune out the world around him and pretend a little longer. He doesn't know how much longer he can pretend. Unfortunately for Izuku, This means that he doesn't hear the sewer grate open in the tunnel or the garbled voice that makes a promise to turn the boy into a perfect meat suit. No, Izuku knows nothing of his fast approaching fate until a cool, slimy sensation envelopes his arm. Izuku freezes mid-step, snapping his head down to look at the swampy green sludge curling around his wrist and forearm. Wait, Izuku doesn't get the chance to finish his question before that same sludge floods his mouth, forcing its way down his throat. On instinct, Izuku tries to lurch forward and spit it out, but the force behind the slime is too much. Izuku flails around, frantically trying to find something solid to push away, but he can barely move, and when he does, the sludge just gives way and Izuku's hands push deeper into the blob. Izuku feels tendrils of the cold viscous liquid curl around his torso, pulling him deeper into the mass. The slime in his throat is completely blocking his airway and Izuku doesn't know how long it's been since he took a breath, but he does know that the edges of his vision are turning black and fuzzy. His arms and legs feel like lead and he can't move much anymore. Oh, Izuku thinks, this feels kind of nice on my burn. Maybe this isn't so bad. A broken bar. Just as Izuku's eyes fall shut, a booming voice echoes through the tunnel, but he can't tell what they are saying. There's too much slime in his ears. He can't really bring himself to care anyway. Izuku is so tired. He's good at pretending, great even. He has managed to get by for 4 years on pretending, but here he is, presented with an opportunity for a way out, without him ever having to admit he wants it to end. Izuku won't have to stop pretending and acknowledge the thought that has been dwelling in the back of his mind for so long. So, Izuku relaxes and says a silent thank you to the sludge that has made the decision for him. Izuku has no idea what happens next. He goes from peacefully drifting away 1 second, to violently coughing and heaving up bits of sewage on his hands and knees the next. For I am here, is all Izuku manages to catch as he knocks sludge out of his ears. Lifting his eyes to his apparent savior, Izuku freezes, mouth falling open. All Might? Izuku has mostly gotten rid of his stutter, but he was just saved by Japan's #1 hero. Sue him for stumbling over his words. He wishes All Might hadn't saved him. Sorry I let you get caught up in all this, my boy. The pro bellows, hands on his hips in a classic hero pose. Don't worry about tight. A broken bar. Izuku responds in a daze. Fantastic. Now, if you're alright. All Might turns and crouches down, as if he is about to jump, but Izuku can't let his idol leave quite yet. Wait, I just want to ask you one question, Izuku says, struggling to stand. He knows it's stupid, but if he can just hear All Might tell him ... yeah, maybe Izuku will be able to pretend a little longer. Wobbling as he takes a step forward, arm outstretched to get the hero's attention, Izuku stumbles. He doesn't realize what he's grabbed onto for support until it's too late. All Might is already in the air, practically flying above the rooftops. Izuku can't help the scream he lets out as he watches the ground grow further and further away. This catches All Might's attention, the hero looking down, seemingly surprised to see a child hanging off his leg. Let go, boy, All Might says, shaking his leg to try and rid himself of the stowaway. Izuku grips on tighter, wrapping his legs around the hero. If I let go now, I'll die, he yells over the wind. The pro relents his efforts to unlatch the boy, apparently just now realizing the current situation. Instead, All Might shifts his grip to hold onto the back of Izuku's shirt in an effort to protect the boy. All this really serves to do is send shooting pain across Izuku's back, the hero's fist digging agonizingly into his burns. Izuku grits his teeth and does his best to ignore it for the duration of their flight. When the pair lands on a rooftop, Izuku collapses to his knees, sucking in air through his nose while keeping his mouth pressed tightly shut. He refuses to show how weak he is in front of All Might. That was reckless, child, the pro says, walking to the edge of the roof, presumably preparing to leave again. Wait, please, All Might, just one question. Izuku can't let the hero go yet. He needs to hear him say it. He can't keep pretending without at least something to cling to. Fine, citizen, I will answer your question, but make it quick. I have hero duties to attend to, All Might says, coughing into his fist. Of course, I know it's stupid to ask, but well, Here goes. Can I be a hero? Even without a quirk? Kids at school are mean to me. They say I can't, and I know I'll never be as great as you, but I'll be able to help at least a few people, right? Izuku shifts his gaze between his idol's eyes, preparing for the generic, peer-approved response of course, anyone can be a hero. Follow your dreams. It's not much, it's just what every hero says when asked if anyone can be a hero, but Izuku knows that it will be enough to let him pretend. He'll be able to cling to the words of his idol telling him not to give up. He'll be able to face Kaken as many times as he needs to until he graduates. He'll be able to ignore the voice in the back of his mind telling him Towa. Number. What? Izuku's whole body freezes, expectant smile slowly slipping off his face. No, I'm sure you try your best, but really, you should give up that dream and pick something more realistic. You need to be strong to be a hero, and quirkless people just aren't. I'm sorry, my boy. All Might walks past Izuku, clapping him on the shoulder as he does. Izuku doesn't even react to the burning pain that flares at the contact. Eyes unfocused, he doesn't turn to watch the hero leave. It's okay, he can still pretend. It's okay, it's okay. Izuku feels the tears dripping onto his hands before he realizes he is crying. Frantically wiping his cheeks, Izuku stands up and takes a deep breath. He can't let himself feel the impact of all of this right now. If he does a broken bar, Izuku's eyes drift over to the ledge of the roof. If you want a quirk so bad, pray that you'll have one in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof. Number. Izuku squeezes his eyes shut and shakes his head, trying to disperse the thoughts. As he retreats from the roof, taking the stairs down, Izuku reframes everything that just happened. He didn't want to be killed by the sludge villain. He was just exhausted and delusional from lack of oxygen. All Might didn't tell him to give up on his dream. The hero just made Izuku realize that being a hero isn't really what he wants to do when he grows up. His idol didn't call him weak. He just means that, as the symbol of peace, no one really compares to him. See, Izuku was a master of pretending. Reality is now bearable, twisted into a palatable almost truth. Making his way out of the building and back towards the direction of the parking garage, Izuku hears an explosion. Not just any explosion. This particular sound is one that Izuku is all too familiar with and is usually paired with yelling, swearing, and blonde hair, and it's coming from just a few streets over. Following the flow of the crowd, Izuku finds himself behind a police barricade, watching his former best friend struggle against the same slime that had attacked him earlier. But, hadn't All Might defeated that villain? Surely the #1 hero wouldn't let something as dangerous as that get away. The realization settles over Izuku, the cold burn of shame covering the entirety of his being. It's Izuku's fault. Izuku must have made All Might drop the bottles containing the villain, and now Kaken is in danger. Panic creeps into his chest as he looks to the pro-heroes standing around. Why is no one helping? Kaken always said Izuku would never be able to save anyone, and that may be true, but Izuku refuses to be the reason someone is hurt. Before he even has a chance to second-guess himself, Izuku was sprinting forward, a singular goal in mind. Don't let Kaken die. There has to be something. Some weakness. Everything has a weakness, Izuku thinks, eyes darting all over the villain, locking in on its eyes. There, Izuku swings his bag as hard as he can, hoping to still have some accuracy with his shoulders in the state they are, and lets it sail through the air. The bag's corner finds its target, jabbing into the villain's eye. The sludge rears back, seemingly in pain, and pulls away from Kaken's face for a moment. The blonde coughs and gulps down a few breaths of air before the tendrils of sewage wrap around his face again. Izuku doesn't relent, clawing at whatever he can reach in an effort to keep Kaken alive until a pro steps in. But of course, just as was the case when he was attacked, Izuku's hands glide through the villain, unable to make any difference. Apparently tired of the nuisance that is Midoriya Izuku, the villain creates an arm from its amorphous body, aiming a blow at the boy. Izuku doesn't allow himself to stop, however, his efforts to pry the villain away from Kaken never faltering. Whatever happens to him is inconsequential. The blow never comes, though, a strong arm guarding Izuku's body, and he looks up to see All Might standing beside him. The hero reaches into the sludge and grabs Kaken's arm before using a Detroit smash to force the villain off of the boy, pulling both boys behind him at the same time. Izuku looks over to Kaken. The boy is clearly exhausted and scrapped up, but he's alive. Izuku did it. He didn't let anyone get seriously hurt or killed. Izuku might not have been the one to actually save him, but he helped Ida. Foolish child, you could have been killed, not to mention that you inconvenienced every pro here by adding another at-risk civilian to the mix. Pro Hero Death Arms says, pulling Izuku roughly to the side. Do you even have a quirk that is suited to help in this situation? No, sir, but I wasn't just going in without a plan. I aimed for the villain's eye on purpose. Izuku tried to reason. He knows he is just a quirkless weakling, but he helped, right? If you saw all these pros with strong quirks, unable to do anything, why would you think you could ever? Izuku stops listening. He's heard this all before. He knows where it's going and he doesn't care to hear it again. Instead, he listens into what the pros are telling Kaken. You were so brave, kid, and that quirk, man, as strong as you are, I can't wait to see the kind of hero you'll become. Say, make sure to check out my agency when it comes time for internships. You're gonna go to a hero school, right? Yeah, that seems about right. Kaken and his amazing quirk were able to last a lot longer than Izuku had, fighting back until a pro finished off the villain. A smack to the side of his head brings Izuku's attention back to the hero who was scolding him. Are you even listening, kid? Death Arms asks, giving Izuku a wide-eyed, exasperated look. Rolling his eyes, the pro waves the boy off as he turns away. Just get out of here. Right, Izuku was probably in their way. The boy stands up and, for the third time today, tries to make his way back to his parking garage. He pretends that the day's events were tiring and he just needs to get back home to rest. He's not emotionally and mentally exhausted, he's just sleepy. Pretending isn't as easy as it used to be, but Izuku can do it for just a little longer. Oi, Deku. He can't keep pretending. Izuku turns to face his classmate who apparently followed him. He can't keep pretending. Yes, Kaken. The blonde looks at him with nothing but disgust and malice. He can't keep pretending. Just so you know, you did nothing to help today. I didn't need you. You just got in the way and you'll never be a hero. Just give up already. Kaken yells before shoving past him. Izuku feels something inside him shatter and, he can't keep pretending. One by one, the careful lies and half-truths and fantasies come crumbling down and Izuku can't pretend any longer. No more pretending that he isn't lonely and homesick. No more pretending that Bakugou Katsuki is his friend. No more pretending that he will be able to make new friends and go to a new school and be normal and wanted and loved. No more pretending that he is okay. No more pretending he wants to live. Izuku was so desperately, indescribably tired, and he doesn't want to do this anymore. He forces his feet to carry him just a little further. If he can just make it a little further, he can finally be finished. He doesn't know how long he walks or really how he got here, but the next time he is aware of his surroundings, he is on the pedestrian walkway of a bridge. All the sounds around him are muffled and he can hardly feel the radiating heat from the wings of scars Katsuki gave him. Had that really just been earlier today? Funny, Izuku thinks as he climbs on top of the railing. Katsuki gave me these wings, but they won't help me fly. Izuku looks down at the water below. There are large rocks rising above the surface near the base of the support beams. Double-checking the height to be sure it's enough to finally end it all, he pauses. No, this isn't right, Izuku thinks, turning around to face away from the ledge. That's better. Katsuki shoves his fists in his pockets as he walks away from Deku and the scene of the villain attack. He feels his face crunch in embarrassment, shame and jealousy. Three ugly emotions that he will never admit he feels, especially not to Deku. Embarrassment from the fact that, not only was he weak enough to get captured in the first place, but that he had to be saved by fucking Deku. Shame at knowing he and his stupid, destructive quirk caused damage to the city and heroes. Jealousy that Deku, quirkless and weak, was able to save Katsuki's life. Katsuki knew he was about to suffocate. He was on the brink of death, and there came Deku, putting his life on the line to protect him. Deku acted like a hero today and it drove Katsuki mad. Fuck, Katsuki bellows, kicking a rock as he makes his way to where the two extras are waiting for him. You okay, Bakugou? Extra number 1 asks, looking up from his phone. TCH, obviously I'm fine, Katsuki says, turning his face to the side. Let's just fucking go to the arcade or whatever. He turns to leave without checking to see if they follow. You know, extra number 2 calls from somewhere behind him. I thought you and Deku were friends when you were kids. Don't you think you went a little hard on him today? Katsuki flinches. He really hadn't meant to burn him as badly as he had, but his quirk can be hard to regulate. If he doesn't burn it off, the nitroglycerin builds up, and he hadn't used his quirk all day. So when he went to shove Deku a broken bar, of course I didn't. That useless fuck needed to learn his place. I was just reminding him of the rest of Katsuki's words get stuck in his throat. Is that ... Deku? Extra number 1 practically whispers. There, on the railing of the bridge in front of them, is Deku. He is loosely holding onto the pole, as if not really concerned about keeping himself stable, and staring down at the water. Katsuki shifts his eyes to the river, some 75 meters below, putting together the pieces into a picture that he prays he is wrong about. If you want a quirk so bad, pray that you'll have one in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof. Just give up. His own words echo in his head as he drags his eyes back up to his classmate. He wouldn't, right? Yeah, Katsuki has said some pretty horrible things, but Deku wouldn't really a broken bar. Just as Katsuki is about to panic, Deku shifts his stance, turning away from the ledge. See, Katsuki thinks, I knew he wouldn't actually. Deku lets go of the post entirely, gently lifting his arms out from his sides. He tilts his head back, closing his eyes, and for a second it just looks like he is enjoying the warm evening air. Then he tips back. Katsuki finds that his legs are apparently made of concrete and firmly affixed to the ground, as all he is able to do is watch as a mess of green curls plummets downward. All three boys stand in silence for a few seconds before a dull crack pierces the air. It's a sickening sound that Katsuki doesn't think he will ever be able to forget. He brings a hand to his mouth. Surely he is screaming and just can't hear it, but his lips are closed and he hasn't made a sound since they got there. With trembling legs, Katsuki forces himself forward, walking onto the bridge, to the spot Deku was just at. Gripping the railing with white knuckles, the blonde slowly peers over the edge. Katsuki can't breathe. On the large rock that protrudes from the base of the bridge lies a body, a tiny mess of green hair and mangled limbs, now doused in too much red. The red trails down the rock and leaks into the river water. Katsuki stares with burning, tear-filled eyes as Deku's body slides down the rock before creating ripples as it joins the rushing water. He turns away from the sight, raking his hands through his hair and pulling at it as he slides down the railing. He doesn't know which of the extras called the police or when they got there, but suddenly Katsuki finds himself being wrapped in a blanket as police lights tint the colors of everything around him. He almost doesn't know who called his mom, but she is crouching in front of him. She isn't crying, but her eyes look glossy and her eyebrows are drawn together in concern. It's an unfamiliar look on her, and Katsuki doesn't like it. Mom? Katsuki manages, voice catching at the end and more tears spill over. I think I did a bad thing. Izuku is cold. He is cold and he is alive and he is hungry and he is tired. Why is he so tired? No, wait, better question. Why is he alive? Izuku knows he should be dead. He remembers the bridge and the river below and he remembers making his decision, so why the hell is he alive? Izuku takes in his surroundings, trying to piece together what happened. He's on a familiar beach with trash heaps spotting the shoreline. Okay, take Obo Beach. That makes sense. The river under the bridge that Izuku jumped from empties into this cove. So it seems perfectly reasonable that his body would wash up here. But that's the thing. Izuku's body. He should be dead and it should be a lifeless corpse that lays here right now, so why is Izuku hungry and tired and cold? Izuku takes a deep, frustrated breath. Think logically, he tells himself. A difficult task given his current state. He is shivering, absolutely starving, completely exhausted, and struggling to catch his breath even sitting still. There had to be someone with a very strong healing quirk right there, or maybe someone with a quirk that cushioned my fall. But then why wouldn't they fish me out of the water after they kept me from dying? Izuku finds himself slipping back into his old mumbling habit. Before he can get too far down a rabbit hole, he feels his stomach cramp and hunger. Okay, food first, then a nap, then figure out what happened, Izuku decides, slowly standing up in the sand with unsure legs. Out of habit, he goes to grab his school bag, but finds the area around him barren. Fantastic, Izuku was now alive, despite his best efforts, hungry, and missing his phone and wallet, meaning food from the convenience store at the end of the street isn't an option. Normally, he would just go back to his parking garage and eat some of the food he keeps on hand there. Izuku wobbles in the sand and forces his eyes to stay open. His hunger cramps are starting to feel like the kind he used to get when his mom first started ditching him for days at a time without any food in the house or grocery money. Izuku sighs, not proud of the decision he's just arrived at. He all but drags himself to the convenience store that he stops by quite often on his way home from work, nearly collapsing several times. Izuku's vision is blurry from exhaustion and he is shivering so violently that the slightly uneven slabs of the sidewalk are enough to pose a genuine obstacle. Eventually, Izuku makes it to the shop and slips inside as quietly as he can. No one is at the register at the moment, so Izuku takes this as his opportunity, grabbing a sandwich and a bottle of water and shoving them down his pants. Not exactly where he would like his dinner to be, but he doesn't have much of a choice, given that all he is wearing is a thin t-shirt and his school uniform pants. Saying a quiet apology to the store owners, Izuku dips back outside and down the nearest alley. He sinks to the floor behind a dumpster, blocking anyone on the street from seeing him. Izuku wastes no time tearing into the sandwich, eating it like it's his first meal in days. Izuku pauses mid-chew at that thought. Is this his first meal in days? How long was he out for? Izuku looks up at the sky, the sun shining high above, signaling that it is probably around noon. It had been sunset when he jumped, so it's at least the next day. Theoretically, whoever's quirk it was that kept him, annoyingly, alive might have also knocked him out for a while. He shrugs and finishes his sandwich, downing the water in a few long gulps. Whatever it is, I'll figure it out when I wake up, Izuku thinks, already feeling his eyelids droop. He crosses his arms and leans back against the brick building behind him, getting comfortable before allowing himself to drift off. When Izuku wakes, he has to blink for a while as his eyes adjust. It's pitch black out now, probably close to midnight, and the air has a slight chill. Well, at least Izuku feels like it does. He's still shivering, though not as badly now. He gets up, dusting off his pants, and makes his way back home. Although he is not nearly as exhausted as he was before his impromptu alley nap, he still feels pretty drained. Yeah, this is definitely a quirk side effect. When I figure out who is responsible for my continued existence, Izuku thinks, I'm gonna kill them, and then myself, which is incredibly annoying that I have to do it again. Izuku wraps his arms around himself to fight off the chill as he rounds the corner to the street that his parking garage is on. He does a quick check to make sure no one is following him before dipping into the opening to the underground garage. He doesn't really think anyone is following him, but Izuku has always been cautious about the location of his home. The old storage room that Izuku had turned into his home is on the third level down, right next to the door to the stairwell. Usually, he likes the spot he chose to set up as a home base. It's down far enough that no one will find it by accident if they wander into the parking garage. It's underground so it thermoregulates fairly well, meaning it doesn't get too hot in the summer or too cold in the winter, even without heating or air conditioning. It's also not so far down that he dreads making the trek up to go to work or school. Today, however, shivering and somehow still tired and hungry, Izuku finds himself cursing his choices as he struggles down the final flight of stairs to his floor. Pushing the door of the stairwell shut behind him, Izuku rests his back against the cool metal of the door. Catching his breath, he pauses then, realizing he barely feels a dull echo cross his shoulders where his burns should be. The quirk that kept him alive must have also healed any current wounds, though, based on the tender skin, it probably still scarred. Izuku huffs out the breath, pushing off the door of the stairwell and opening the door to his room. He makes his way to the love seat and collapses into it, resting his head on the back. Sure, the bed was only a few steps more, but Izuku really couldn't be bothered with the effort, so here is good. He lazily grabs the blanket draped over the back of the love seat, wrapping it around himself as he lays over, settling into the cushions. Izuku has no idea what time it is when he wakes again, given that he is underground and freshly deprived of his phone. He stands and stretches, yawning as he goes. Izuku was surprised to find that he is mostly back to normal now, albeit a little hungry still. The teen shuffles to the pantry cabinet, pulling out a meal replacement bar before settling down at the small table. He opens the laptop that he keeps there, preparing to research exactly what could have happened to him when he jumped. His laptop was a broken bar gift from one of the bullies at school. He doesn't like the idea of stealing, but this particular kid was always bragging that his parents were rich. So, when the opportunity presented itself, a laptop mysteriously disappeared from that kid's bag and Izuku now keeps it at home so no one recognizes it as the missing one. Taking a bite of his meal bar, Izuku opens up a search tab and navigates to the quirk registry index for Musutafu. Not exactly public records, but Izuku has always been rather resourceful. When you love quirks as much as Izuku does, hacking into minimum security websites like the local government quirk registry are a fun, challenging weekend project. He starts with healing quirks. While he originally theorized that it could be that someone cushioned his fall, he has since changed his mind. He was conscious for the entirety of his fall, and he didn't see or feel anything that could have held him up. He almost can't think of a reason that a quirk like that would have this many negative effects. So, healing quirk it is. It would have to be incredibly powerful. Izuku had been careful about picking where he jumped from and where he would land. That bridge was at least 75 meters above the water, meaning that, even if he missed the rocks and landed in the water, a fall from that height is still lethal. Scrolling through the listed quirks, Izuku easily weeds through the majority. Most are minor healing quirks, most likely not able to heal a single broken bone in one sitting. The rest can be ruled out due to activation requirements. Recovery Girl, for example, has to make physical contact through a kiss to activate her quirk. Given that Izuku was, again, 75 meters from the nearest possible person, physical activation is out of the question. Izuku makes it to the bottom of the list and pauses. Now, there's always a possibility that someone happened to be on that bridge with an unregistered quirk or possibly visiting from a nearby prefecture, but the odds of that are low enough to be considered null. He pops the last of his meal bar in his mouth, leaning back in his chair. He laces his fingers behind his head as he thinks, a hypothesis forming. No one with an eligible healing quirk, no other signs of interference, no one at the scene, except Izuku. Izuku ponders aloud. He gets up and grabs his pocket knife from the bedside table. Might as well try again, I suppose. I'm either right or I get to be dead. Win-win ... sort of. Izuku sits on the floor. Crossing his legs, he opens the pocket knife and holds it to his wrist. Taking a deep breath, Izuku drags the knife up his forearm, nearly all the way to his inner elbow, before repeating on the other arm. It stings, but it's nothing worse than Izuku was used to. He watches as the blood bubbles up to the surface, beating along the deep cuts, before spilling over. He stares, with mild fascination, as the blood streams down his arms, pooling in his hands before dripping onto the floor. Izuku continues to watch until his vision gets blurry and he feels lightheaded. If his theory is correct, he died on impact last time, meaning he never felt what it's like to die. It's not all that bad. He's cold and disoriented, probably from blood loss. His clothes feel strange, clinging to him as they become soaked in blood, but he can't bring himself to care. Izuku simply lays back, resting his head on the concrete floor, staring up at the single utility light that hardly ever works. It's on now, and Izuku smiles lazily up at it. Yeah, Dying isn't all that bad, Izuku comes to, gasping as he shoots upright. He looks down at his clothes, sticking to him with only partially dried blood. He lifts his wrists and finds two fresh, pink scars running up the length of his forearms. "You've got to be kidding me," Izuku scoffs, shaking his head. He only has a moment to take in the fact that he is alive before he starts shivering violently. Somehow, much worse than last time, Izuku does his best to strip out of the wet clothes, tripping his way over to the clothes rack to pull on a hoodie and sweats, the warmest things he saw, before making his way back to his bed and slipping beneath the covers. "Okay," Izuku thinks, teeth chattering far too much to think out loud the way he likes. "I have a quirk." "Huh?" Izuku laughs tiredly. "Thanks for the advice, Katsuki." Just like last time, it isn't long until Izuku passes out. Apparently rising from the dead is a very draining hobby. When he wakes again, he is shivering less, though he is still shaking enough to make opening his bag of chips difficult. Izuku manages it eventually, scarfing down the contents in record time before grabbing another meal replacement bar from his pantry. As he sits on the floor next to the pantry eating his bar, he stares at the large pool of blood. It's still wet, meaning he couldn't have been out for more than an hour or so. But the last time he woke up, it had been at least 12 hours. Maybe something to do with the trauma to the body relating to the injury. Jumping from a bridge would cause more complicated injuries than simple blood loss from clean cuts. But if it took less time to come back, why the worst symptoms this time around? Izuku was freezing, breaking out in a cold sweat, out of breath like he just ran a marathon, and still tired despite having just woken up. Holding part of his meal bar in his mouth, Izuku crawls to the bookshelf to pull out a fresh notebook. He thinks best when he is writing. Izuku opens to the first page and begins the notebook he never thought he'd be able to make, his own quirk analysis. He begins with writing down what he knows. Regeneration, revival quirk. The length of time depends on the destructive nature of the death. Traumatic injuries take several hours, 6-12 minimum, to regenerate. Less complicated deaths related to blood loss or clean-cut injuries are healed in an hour or less. Drawbacks, side effects. Izuku looks down to the brand new stripes of pink winding up his arms. He didn't notice any new scars from jumping, but then again, that would have caused mostly internal damage. Scars related to the cause of death, fatigue and extreme hunger for approximately 24 hours after coming back. Shock-like symptoms, shivering, elevated pulse, shortness of breath, clammy skin. Izuku tapes his pencil to his chin. He thinks back to the drawbacks and side effects of the other healing quirks in the database. They usually draw from the stamina of the one being healed, but given that he is healing himself a broken bar, repeated use of quirk before completely recovering results in more intense symptoms. He looks down at the information he has so far. It's not complete by any means, but it's somewhere to start. He places the notebook back on the bookshelf before crawling back into bed. As he drifts off, Izuku looks at the blood on the floor, frowning. "That's gonna stain a broken bar," he mumbles as his eyes flutter shut. All this nap-taking and passing out is really throwing off Izuku's internal clock. He groans as he sits up, once again feeling much better, though not back to normal. The first thing he notices, however, is that he has never had to pee this badly in his life. Izuku stumbles out of bed and out the door to the restrooms that are, annoyingly, all the way on the other side of the parking garage. Really, they aren't that far away. Maybe only 20 meters. But, if Izuku's estimations are correct, he hasn't gone to the bathroom in roughly 48 hours. Although, maybe those stories of people who piss themselves when they die are true. Izuku grimaces as he opens the bathroom door. He hopes that's not true. Either way, he needs a shower. Given how much blood is still crusted to him, he'll have to check and see what day it is. If it's the weekend, he might be able to sneak into the school bathrooms to have his shower. Once Izuku finishes in the bathroom, he makes his way back to his room. He stands in the doorway, staring daggers at the pool of blood on the floor. Izuku was still pretty fatigued and mopping up a blood puddle isn't exactly sounding very appealing right now. Accepting what he needs to do, Izuku grabs the already ruined clothes that he had on when he died, using them as rags to sop up the majority of the mess before throwing them away. He takes a few napkins, wiping up what's left before tossing those too. He stares at the remaining streaks of blood, debating what to do. He shrugs, turning away. "I'll get a rug," he decides, "flourished-stained anyway." He plops down in his chair, opening his laptop once again. The clock and date in the corner states that it is 10 in the morning and Monday. Izuku hasn't missed a day of school since he was 9, but he supposes that dying, twice, is a good enough reason to take a break. He decides to treat himself with his favorite pastime, looking through news articles for any hero fights worth analyzing. Izuku pulls up the local news website and only gets a few stories down before his eyes lock on a headline: "Sludge villain victim witnesses a tragedy." Izuku clicks on the article, knowing it has to be about Katsuki. Izuku was never interviewed at the scene of the sludge villain's attack, so that only leaves Katsuki. His eyes scan the article. Bakugou Katsuki, a local middle school student, can't seem to catch a break. Izuku tilts his head as he continues to read. What happened after the attack? After bravely surviving a villain attack, Bakugou had to bear witness to something no child should have to see. The teen was walking to an arcade with friends when he came across a classmate on a bridge. Izuku's mouth falls open slightly as he rakes his eyes over the next paragraph. There's no way this is talking about what he thinks it is: a broken bar. The classmate, unnamed for their privacy, jumped from the bridge, committing suicide. While no body was recovered, the circumstances and witness reports have led police to declare the victim dead. Aged 14, the victim, a quirkless, was known by Bakugou, according to the two other witnesses present. Izuku can't believe it. He laughs, a tired thing with no real humor behind it. Izuku feels the tears well up in his eyes as he shuts his laptop. He died, and Katsuki is still the main focus. Izuku was nothing more than an unnamed tragic side character in the story that is Bakugou Katsuki's rise to stardom. Katsuki swings his legs idly from where they hang off the fallen tree that acts as a natural bridge over the stream. He's been coming here a lot, ever since ... Yeah, it's become a routine for Katsuki. For the past 2 weeks, as soon as he gets out of school, he makes his way to the spot and thinks, sometimes about the horrible things he has done, sometimes about that night, always about him. Katsuki brings one leg up, wrapping his arms around it and resting his cheek on his knee. His school bag hangs from his shoulder. It feels a lot heavier with the extra journal it holds, but Katsuki is used to the weight. He has carried that journal with him everywhere since that night. It was his most prized possession. As much as he wishes he could just be angry, an emotion that Katsuki is very familiar with, he just isn't. Well, at least, Katsuki is not angry at anyone else. That doesn't mean he hasn't been lashing out. Of course he has. He has yelled at his parents, lackeys, teachers. He's thrown things and exploded furniture. Anger is his default setting, after all. But, never once has any of that been from anger at the other person. Instead, Katsuki is angry at himself. Rightfully so. He reminds himself, he knows that. Katsuki looks down at the shallow stream, remembering what he always comes here to remember: a hand, outstretched and genuine, and a boy, smiling through the insults. Why Katsuki couldn't just accept the hand, he'll never understand. An alarm from his phone jerks Katsuki from his thoughts. He fishes it out of his pocket, staring at the notification label before shutting it off. The blonde wastes no time standing, making his way carefully back across the log, before heading back into town. Katsuki was never one to be late for an appointment. His mother offered to come, of course, but Katsuki asked to do this alone. He can barely admit he needs this, let alone have an audience for it. This hadn't been his idea, but it became increasingly clear that it was probably necessary. He stands at the entrance of the narrow brick building in front of him, double-checking the address before pushing open the front door. He takes a second to survey the room and get his bearings before making his way up to the front desk. "Appointment for Bakugou Katsuki," he says, drumming his finger on the counter. The receptionist hums in understanding as he types something into the computer. "Ah yes, you're right on time. She's ready for you, if you'd like to head on back. Second door on the right. Katsuki merely grunts in response as he turns to head down the hallway. The door in question is cracked slightly, so he doesn't bother with knocking before letting himself in. The door is creaky though, and the woman in the room turns towards the door at the sound. She has muted dark blue-gray skin and long pastel coral-colored hair. Her clothes are flowy in soft shades of pink and sage. She wears dainty gold jewelry, including several earrings that run up the length of her pointed elf-like ears. She is chubby and wearing a genuine smile that dimples her cheeks while her eyes remain closed and everything about her seems a broken bar soft. She looks like the kind of person who likes to give hugs. Katsuki does not like hugs. Can I help you? The lady asks, not getting up from her chair. Even her voice is soft. Yeah, I'm Bakugou Katsuki. I'm here for my appointment with Dr. Mori or whatever. Katsuki doesn't wait to be invited to sit before making his way to the chair opposite the woman, resting his bag in his lap. I'm assuming that's you? When Katsuki speaks, her head snaps in his direction and she shifts in her chair to properly face Katsuki. Yes, that's me. Although, feel free to call me Akatsuki, if that makes you more comfortable. Whichever you prefer. Katsuki grimaces. He's never been one to care about politeness or honorifics, but calling her by her given name seems too intimate. So how does this fucking therapy thing work, Mori? Well, that's really up to you. We can talk about something as basic as your day if you just want to get used to the setting, or we could dive into why you decided to make your appointment. I know nothing other than that you checked off the boxes indicating you experienced a traumatic event, Mori says, and Katsuki's grimace deepens. He didn't like making what happened sound like it happened to Katsuki. He knows he isn't the victim in this, but his mom had been the one to make the appointment. She doesn't know what Katsuki has done. So, to her, Katsuki has just witnessed his best friend since childhood do that. Please, feel free to tell me as little or as much as you'd like, Mori says, still facing Katsuki, though she hasn't opened her eyes once. And, because Katsuki has never had a filter, he blurts out, "Why don't you fucking look at me?" He cringes inwardly a bit at that. Probably wasn't the right foot to start out with for his new therapist. Mori, however, doesn't seem fazed by this. Oh, I suppose I should explain that. Yes, I'm blind, and a bit sensitive to light, so I choose to keep my eyes closed, Mori explains. Even though she doesn't act bothered, Katsuki can't help but feel a little awkward for drawing attention to it. But, because Katsuki didn't learn his lesson the first time, he shoots off a follow-up question. That got something to do with your quirk? Not really. I could explain my quirk, if you'd like, though, Mori offers, again unfazed by Katsuki's tactless nature. Katsuki shrugs and gives a half nod before he realizes she can't see him. Yeah, oh, sure, he huffs out. My quirk is called Memory Vault. Basically, I remember every single thing I hear, whether I like it or not, and I can easily sort through and recall those memories when I choose to, which is why you won't see me taking notes during our sessions, Mori says, pulling one leg comfortably up into the plush chair she is sitting in. Katsuki nods to himself. Good. So it's not one of those creepy fucking emotion-sensing quirks that you hear about therapists using, fucking routing around in people's brains and shit. Mori tilts her head at that. Is there a reason you wouldn't want me to be able to read your emotions? Now, Katsuki knows he made the decision to agree to this appointment and this seemingly nice enough therapist is only doing her job. But years of knee-jerk reactions and an explosive temper don't magically go away just because he knows he is an ass. Maybe cause I don't need a hag like you in my fucking head. Katsuki snaps. Anger really is an emotion he is too familiar with, always choosing it for its reliable response. People either get mad in return or they get hurt. It either ends in a fight, which Katsuki knows how to handle, or they leave and Katsuki doesn't have to worry about the situation anymore. Mori, however, doesn't seem to follow Katsuki's rules. She doesn't yell back or cry or tell him to leave. Instead, she responds as if Katsuki hadn't raised his voice at all, and had just given a genuine answer. If you don't feel ready to discuss your emotions, why make an appointment with me? There's no pressure to talk, Of course, but that is what I'm here for. I only want to help you. Sometimes, we feel as if we don't deserve that help, but please hear me when I tell you that you do, Mori says, folding her hands in her lap. Katsuki doesn't know what to do with the response like that. He feels tears prick along his lashes, but they have the decency not to fall just yet. Katsuki swallows hard, dropping his gaze to his bag resting in his lap. He's never been one to back down from a challenge, but fuck if this wasn't challenging. He takes a breath to hopefully steady his voice. Katsuki stops, clenching his jaw and forcing the tears not to fall. I'm sorry. That might have been a bit of a loaded first question. We can try something else. Yeah. No, Katsuki interrupts. He can do this, and knowing that she can't see him somehow makes it easier, like there's less of an audience for his weakness. No, I can answer that. I'm not great at fucking, verbalizing, or whatever, but I can do it. I don't want you to know what my real emotions are because I don't want to acknowledge what they are. Why would you not want people to recognize what those emotions really are? Mori asks, entirely genuine. Katsuki has been rude and aggressive and hostile and argumentative and insulting from the moment he walked in here, and yet she treats him with gentle smiles and a soft voice. She reminds Katsuki of him. Katsuki feels the first tear spill over at that thought and he roughly wipes it away. What if, he starts, his voice breaking a bit, what if everyone finds out that he'd always been better than me? Mori's expression changes, something that's hard to place but unmistakably sad, not responding right away. That who is better than you? He shakes his head, more to himself than anything. Yeah, I don't know what to call him. You don't know his name. I know his name. I always fucking did, but I refused to call him anything but a horrible fucking insult for so long. Do I even deserve to say his name anymore? Katsuki is well and truly crying now, though he hardly makes a sound, his tears falling silently without having to care about who could see. You could always ask this person what name they would prefer. Don't you get it? He's dead. Fucking dead, and I hadn't called him his real name since we were 4. So what the fuck do I call him now? I can't keep calling him that stupid fucking insult, but what right do I have to say his given name after all this time? Katsuki yells, no anger in his voice. It's something closer to desperation. I don't even have the right to mourn him. It's all my fault, all of it, and I can't take it back now. It's too late. We always said we'd be heroes together and I fucking turned into his villain. So how can I just go back to calling him by his name, as if nothing happened? Katsuki is panting by the time he finishes, clutching his bag to his chest. His tears are no longer silent, his unsure voice and gasping breaths making it impossible to hide. Without saying a word, Mori grabs the box of tissues off the table, offering them to Katsuki. He takes them, but just runs his thumb over the corner of the box rather than using them. He doesn't stop crying, but he does take a few deep breaths to get himself under control. She allows Katsuki to catch his breath and calm down a bit before speaking again. I don't know exactly what happened between you two or how this boy died, but we won't get into that today. I do know this. However, you don't earn the right to mourn. It just happens. If you are mourning, it means this person was important enough that you are feeling his loss, or I'm just feeling guilty. Katsuki mumbles as he wipes his eyes. Yes, you probably are, and I won't tell you not to feel guilty. Based on what you've just said, you most likely should feel guilty. But that doesn't mean you aren't also genuinely mourning, Mori says. Katsuki looks down at his hands, scrunching his face a bit as he sniffles quietly. He doesn't really know how to respond to that, but thankfully, Mori doesn't make him. Do you think that if you had apologized to him when he was alive, genuinely, and showed him you were trying to do better, that he would allow you to use his given name again? Katsuki notes that she didn't ask if he thinks he would be forgiven. He pauses to think before responding. I don't know, Katsuki replies honestly, his voice rough from crying. He was a broken bar kind, and more forgiving than most. He still called me a childhood nickname till the day Katsuki cuts himself off. He still can't really talk about it. He clears his throat. Yeah, he might have. Not right away, but maybe if I proved that I was doing better. Well, Mori starts, a painfully gentle smile on her face. How about this? You make a list of things that this boy would have been proud of you for. Let's say 5 things. Once you do all the things on your list, maybe you can introduce me to him by name. Katsuki finds himself smiling back at her, though his smile is a much more subtle one. Yeah, I think that's something he would have liked. Mori nods approvingly just as soft chime sounds from her wrist. She clicks a button on the side of the watch, silencing the alarm. As she stands up and moves towards the door, that is all the time we have today, but that will be your homework for next week. Make your list and bring it back for next time. She holds open the door and Katsuki walks past. Sure fucking thing, Mori, Katsuki offers in lieu of a real goodbye. Katsuki walks home with his hands shoved in his pockets to hide their subtle tremors. He knows his eyes are probably red-rimmed and puffy from crying, but he can't do anything to hide that. He's surprised even himself that he was able to actually talk about anything with Mori. His mother had tried to talk to him, but that always ended in screaming matches and plates thrown across the room. They love each other, but he and his mother have never been great at communicating, and his dad was too much of crybaby for Katsuki to be able to tolerate. After a week, his mother said she had made him an appointment with a therapist, which obviously resulted in more fights. It took another week for him to calm down and come around to the idea. Katsuki will never admit it to his mother, but he actually really likes Mori. She didn't make him feel weak or exposed. She made Katsuki feel like he was fixable. Katsuki arrives at home, slipping his shoes off in the entryway and walking into the dining room where he hears the sound of dishes gently clinking together. He walks through the doorway just as his mother is plating the food for dinner. She looks up when she hears him, keeping her face carefully neutral. So, how did it go? Katsuki just grunts, not really giving an answer, but his mother knows him too well. She smirks, probably knowing that, if it didn't go well, he'd be cussing out the entire household. His father arrives home right after Katsuki, joining them at the table for dinner. He doesn't even bring up the topic. If Katsuki knows his parents, they had a game plan about who would ask and then fill in the other later. Katsuki is quiet all through dinner, his parents thankfully not trying to include him in their conversation. He'd be too wrapped up in his own thoughts to participate anyway, thinking about the list he needs to make. His head feels clearer ever since he left Mori's office, and his task of making a list gave him something to hold on to. It's like he needed that clear goal, something to work towards. He excuses himself from the table early and goes to his room, bringing his school bag with him. After shutting and locking the door, he gently takes the journal from his bag, placing it on his desk. Katsuki takes a seat and stares at it, as he often does. Its pages are warped from water damage and the cover is charred, the writing on the front bleeding and faded. Katsuki has never opened it. He never will. He doesn't have a right to see what is written there. He doesn't even have a right to own this. But, for some reason, the officer that took his statement said there was no one else to claim it. They were going to throw it away if Katsuki didn't take it, and the boy knew he couldn't let that happen. So he accepted it and brought it home with him from the police station. He didn't know why and he didn't want it, so he had asked the officer. They said that she declined all personal effects and asked that she not be notified of any updates to the case. That didn't make any sense to Katsuki. Who wouldn't want the things their dead son had treasured? When they got home, Katsuki asked his mom what was up with Auntie, but she said she hadn't talked to her in a few years, something about just growing apart. So, Katsuki now had this journal that pained him to look at but felt too important to leave on a shelf somewhere, resulting in his current situation of carrying it with him everywhere. Katsuki slides the journal over to make room on the desk, getting out his own notebook and pencil. 5 things that he would be proud of. Katsuki can do that. Katsuki wants to do that. He starts with things he regrets the most, using his quirk on him, ridiculing him for being quirkless, always beating him down, both physically and mentally. If Katsuki just does the opposite of those, that'd be somewhere to start, right? After about an hour of writing down ideas and scribbling them out and choosing what he knows he would have liked the best, Katsuki lifts up his paper and nods at it approvingly. Getting up from his desk, He grabs the picture frame he now keeps next to his bed. He had to ask his mom to go through old family photo albums to find it. In the picture there is a little blonde boy and a little green-haired boy, both wearing matching all-white pajamas, striking hero poses. There may be 3 or 4, definitely not long before it all went to shit. Katsuki takes the list he made and tapes it to the frame, covering his younger self, but not him. Katsuki looks at the list and the photo one last time, his eyes watering a bit. "I promise I'll make you proud, I'll be the hero I should have been for you."